Math 3, Unit 4, Section E, or also known as 4.5. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to solve square root equations. Okay, there are some steps here. The first step is to get the root by itself. No cell phones out, please. Okay, so you want to get the radical or root on one side of the equation by itself. So anything you can move, you want to move it. Once you have the root by itself, depending on what the root is, if it's a square root, you would square both sides in order to get rid of the root. If it was a cubed root, you would cube both sides. Okay, and then you want to check your results for extraneous solutions. Now, extraneous solutions are solutions that you get for x, but when you plug them in, they don't work. So you need to always check your answers to make sure when you plug them back in, they will work correctly. One of the main things is that if you end up with a negative under a square root, that's actually an imaginary number, so it's not actually a solution. So you just have to be careful. All right, so example A. Is the root by itself? No. So what would I do to get the root by itself? Very good. Okay, so when I do that, this cancels. I have root 5x minus 1 equals x minus 3. Is the root by itself now? Yes. Good. So how do I get rid of a square root? What power do I raise it to? 2. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So one thing is that the whole purpose of this is to get rid of the root, correctly? So, correct. So when I'm squaring the square root, you're welcome, we get 5x minus 1 equals, and so whenever you square a square root, whatever's inside just comes out, right? X minus 3 squared.
X squared minus 9.
No.
Oh.
X squared minus 6x plus 9.
Oh, I forgot to do this.
Whenever you have two terms, so like x minus 3, that is two terms, you have to use FOIL or the box method in order to multiply it out. Okay? Yes. So let me show you. Do you normally use FOIL or the box method when you're multiplying? FOIL? I was starting to do the box method. I can show you both. But if you're doing FOIL, if you have x minus 3 times x minus 3, x times x, x squared. X times negative 3, negative 3x. Negative 3 times x, negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3, positive 9. Okay? And then we end up with x squared minus 6x plus 9. So you can't distribute the second power through something when there's two terms. You can only do that if there is one term. Okay, now you need to factor this and solve. So we want to set it equal to 0. So what will I do to set this equal to 0? Subtract 5x, and then at the same time I'm also going to add 1 because I want everything on one side of the equation. Now the reason why I moved everything to the right is because you always want your x squared term to be positive. Okay? So now when I add down, I have x squared minus 11x plus 10, and then we're just going to set that equal to 0. It doesn't matter which side the equal 0 is on. Okay, now we have to factor this. So remember, we're looking for a number that adds to be negative 11 and multiplies to be 10. Okay, and what did you say it was, Anthony? Good. X minus 10 and x minus 1, those add to be negative 11 and multiply to be a positive 10. And when we set those equal to 0, what does x equal? 10 and 1. Very good. Now, we talked about how there could be extraneous solutions where one of these solutions may not work. And so you have to take these numbers and plug them back into your original equation. Okay? So, if we do that, we come up here, we have the square root of, I'm going to plug in 10. 5 times 10 minus 1 plus 3 should equal 10. You with me? Okay. 5 times 10 makes 50. 50 minus 1 is 49. And the square root of 49 is 7. So I end up with 7 plus 3 equals 10. And is that a true statement? Okay, so that one checked out. So now I have to check the other one. We have the square root of 5 times 1 minus 1 plus 3 equals 1. 5 times 1 is 5. And then 5 minus 1 is 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. And 2 plus 3 equals 1?
5.
Does 2 plus 3 equal 1?
No. So 6.
No. So 1, yes, that does not work. So that one's out. And so therefore my only answer for this is x equals 10.
Okay.
On the first part, how did you get 7 plus 3?
How did I get 7
50
plus
times 10 is 50.
50 minus 1 is 49, so this ends up being the square root of 49, which is 7. Okay, any other questions on this one? No? Okay, let's try the next one on B. I'm just going to draw a line here so we can. Okay, is the root by itself on here? Okay, so now in order to get rid of the root, I'm going to square both sides. What? Josh, Tiger. Okay, we square both sides. So when I square a square root, what ends up happening? This cancels out your root, and we end up with negative 3x minus 5 equals, and when I square x plus 3, what will that end up making?
X squared plus 6x plus 9.
That is correct. Is anybody confused with this first step that we've done here? Okay, so now the second part is that we need to move everything to one side of the equation so that we can solve and factor. And so which side should I move everything to, the right or the left? The right, because we want the x squared term to stay positive. Okay, so I'm going to add 3x and also add 5. So these cancel, we have x squared plus
9x plus 14.
Good. 9x plus 14 equals 0. So now we're looking for two numbers that will multiply to be 14 and add to be 9. Good. So we have x plus 7 and x plus 2. Those multiply to be 14 and add to be 9. And when we set those equal to 0, what does x equal?
Negative 7 and negative 2.
Good. Okay, so now we need to what?
Plug it in.
Plug them back in to make sure they work. So we'll start with 7. So I'm going to have the square root of negative 3 times negative 7 minus 5 equals negative 7 plus 3. Now I want to show you something on this one. Negative 7 plus 3 makes what? Negative 4. Will a square root ever end up equaling a negative number? No. So do I even really need to finish simplifying this?
Nope.
No, because I'm like, okay, there's no way this square root will equal a negative number, so I'm done. I'm not going to waste my time continuing to figure out something I know is not going to work. Do you guys understand that? Okay. So now let's try negative 2. Hopefully this one works. So we have the square root of negative 3 times negative 2 minus 5 equals negative 2 plus 3. So when I'm simplifying this one, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, and 6 minus 5 is 1. And what is the square root of 1? 1. And that equals negative 2 plus 3 also equals 1. So that means my answer is x equals negative 2. Okay, questions on this?
Yes.
Josh, please stop.
I'm just looking back to see how you immediately canceled out the 7.
I didn't immediate cancel it out. I canceled it out here once I saw that negative 7 plus 3 makes a negative 4, and I know I can't use it.
Okay, alright.
Okay. So the difference here, we've understood that roots and powers are basically the same, right? So when I have a 1/2 power, that means a square root. So when you have a power like this, the 3/4 power, that is really the 4th root of whatever this is to the 3rd power. Do we agree? Okay. So what you can do in order to get rid of this root or power is you just end up raising it to the reciprocal power. Okay? We have to be careful if we need absolute values. If you have an even root and a even exponent, you may need absolute values. Okay? So just kind of keep that in your head. All right, so first thing is that the root is the same thing as your power. So is the root or power by itself right now? No. What is in front? A 3. How do I get rid of the 3?
Divide it out.
Good. We're going to divide by 3 to both sides. So I end up with x minus 2 to the 3/4 power equals, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. Okay, Zach, you getting this? Okay. Now, how do I get rid of that 3/4 power? What would I need to do to that to get rid of it? Good. You raise it to the reciprocal power, which would be 4/3. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the... Very good. Okay, so these cancel. We have x minus 2 equals, and then let's simplify this. How would I write this in order to simplify it?
The 3rd.
Good. So we have the cubed root, or the 3rd root of 8, and then that gets raised to the 4th power. Good. What is the cubed root of 8?
2.
Good. And then 2 to the 4th power is 16, right? Because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So that's 16. And then what will I do now to solve for x? Add 2 to both sides. And so x equals 18. All right, and then we can check our answer. Most of the time, when you only have one answer, it's going to work. It's when you have 2 answers that one usually doesn't end up working. So just for fun, let's go ahead and plug this back in to check it. So we have 3 parentheses 18 minus 2 to the 3/4 power equals 24. Okay, you always do parentheses first. So 18 minus 2 is 16. I'm going to simplify this. Okay, and so we have the 4th root of 16 to the 3rd power. What's the 4th root of 16? 2. So I have 2 to the 3rd power, which is 8. And is 8 times 3, 24. So it checks out. Questions? Yes.
Why wouldn't 3 go by the 16?
Why wouldn't the...
On the outside. The parentheses.
It is by the 16. It's just that you, order of operations, parentheses, exponents, then multiplication and division. So I did my parenthesis first, then I took care of that exponent next, and then that ended up being 2, and the 2 to the 3rd power, which became 8, and then now I can multiply the 3 times the 8. So you have to make sure you use order of operations. Okay? So you remember order of operations?
Yeah, but wouldn't usually you would have 16 to the 3rd power?
Oh, you can write it as 16 to the 3rd power inside if you want to.
But it's still going to have
Yeah. I think it's easier, like quicker, to just do the 4th root of 16, and then once you get the answer, raise it to the 3rd, but you could do it either way. Yeah. Okay, anything else?
What's gonna be?
I thought you were originally talking about this 3. Okay, D. Is the exponent or root by itself?
No, you got
No, what do we do?
Got to.
Add 2 to both sides. Okay, so this cancels. I have x plus 1 to the 3 halves equals, and 25 plus 2 is?
27.
Okay, how do I get rid of the 3 over 2 power?
You do the square root of x.
Raise it to the reciprocal, which is 2/3, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Very good. So I end up with x plus 1 equals, and I'm going to simplify 27 to the 2/3. How will I write that?
Oh, square root of 27.
Cubed root of 27, and I get that answer and I square it. What is the cubed root of 27?
3.
And 3 squared is
9.
9. So that means down here this is 9. From there, what do I do?
Subtract the 1.
Subtract 1 to both sides, and I get x equals
8.
8. Okay? And we could go back and check it, but it does work out. Because I'm amazing. You should know that. Okay. No. All right, so moving on. Okay, we are going to skip these 2 problems on graphing. And we're going to just go to the very bottom. And we have A and B left, and then we'll be done with notes for today. We are going to go back to the graphing and another set of notes. Okay, but today we are going to skip it. Okay, shh, we got this. Okay, so there is no way for me to get the square root by itself because there's 2 roots. Okay, so all we're going to go ahead and do is just square both sides because I have both these square roots that I can get rid of. Now on the left, when I square that square root, what does it become? 5x plus 7, correct? When I square this square root, it becomes 5x plus 7. Do we agree? Okay, now when you square over here, do you see how the 3 is not in a square root?
Yeah.
So what do I have to do to that 3?
3.
I have to square it. Okay, and so 3 squared is 9. And then when I square the square root, that just becomes 2x. And then because those are right next to each other, we multiply them together. And so I have 5x plus 7 equals 18x. And then we will solve. And so I would need to subtract 5x to both sides. I have 7 equals 13x. And then my last step would be to, good. And so x equals 7 over 13. Okay. Questions? All right, last problem. Do you think you guys can do this on your own? No. Okay, but we'll go ahead and do it together for time's sake, because we are actually running out of time. Okay, what will I do? Good. Square both sides. 3x minus 5 equals, when I square x minus 1, Zach, what do I get? When I square x minus 1, what do I get? Do you know how you could write it out and figure it out? What would you do? You need to either FOIL it or you need to use your box method. I can do these in my head, and maybe for some of you, once you write it like this, you might be able to do it in your head.
X squared minus 2x.
Good. X squared minus 2x plus 1. Because negative 1 and negative 1, those add to make negative 2. And then negative 1 times negative 1 makes a positive 1. Okay? Now what? Good. Subtract 3x and add 5 so that everything's on one side of the equal sign. And we always want our x squared term to be positive. Good. That was a question I was asking you. Okay. Negative 2 and negative 3 makes, good. And then 1 and 5 makes 6. And we set that equal to 0. So what numbers multiply to be 6 and add to make negative 5? Good, you're going to need negative 3 and negative 2, because if you use the 6, one would be negative and one would be positive, and then that would make a negative 6. So if we do negative 2 and negative 3, those add to be negative 5 and multiply to make a positive 6. And when we set those equal to 0, what does x equal? Good, 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. Now, whenever you have two answers, you definitely want to check for extraneous solutions. Sometimes both work, sometimes one doesn't. So when I plug these back in, let's check it out. So I'm going to start with 2. So the square root of 3 times 2 minus 5 equals 2 minus 1. What is 3 times 2? 6. And so I have 6 minus 5, which is the square root of 1, which is 1. Does 1 equal 1? Yes. So 2 worked. Okay, so now let's try 3. So we have the square root of 3 times 3 minus 5, and then equals 3 minus 1. What is 3 times 3? 9, and 9 minus 5 is? 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. And 3 minus 1 is 2. So both of these answers ended up working this time. Okay, questions?